Right guys, welcome back to another video on the channel. So in this video I'm going to be looking at the M3 base model MacBook Pro. Now I've been very lucky to have the opportunity to test this thing out for just over a week now. Sadly, don't get to keep this one. But while I've had the opportunity to test it out, I've really got to understand why some people hate this thing so much, because especially when this thing came out, it wasn't the most liked thing, that's for sure. But on the other hand, it has made me realise how much better this was compared to the last 13-inch MacBook Pro we've had for the past 5 years, and it practically hasn't changed. And although it has surprised me a lot and it has done much better than I thought it would have done, I really do understand why people have a problem with this laptop. And when it first came out, there were so many complaints about the fact it's a £1,600 laptop, but it's only got 8GB of RAM, it's only got 500GB of storage, and it's in a base model M3 chip. However, after testing it out for around a week, I've been putting it through its paces, pushing it as best I can. It's safe to say it's a massive improvement from what we had last year with the 13-inch M2 MacBook Pro. And I would like to actually start things off by talking about and comparing it to the previous base model MacBook Pro we've had. Basically, Apple have completely discontinued the 13-inch MacBook Pro. And thankfully so. It was surprisingly very well liked for how poor of a product it was. I didn't really see that many people complain about the fact the 13-inch model is out and being sold when it's a very old design with the same specs as the MacBook Air, but more expensive, and a lot of other worse features as well, but more expensive for literally just the Pro name. However, when they did get rid of this and they made the 14-inch base model M3 MacBook Pro, everyone hated it. And I understand why. You see a price of £1,600 and it only comes with 8GB of RAM. You've got all the right to be not happy with that. It is just overpriced, or at least on paper it is. And especially when you look at like Windows laptops in which you can get 16GB of RAM for less than like £600, it begs the question of why is Apple charging so much money? But when you actually look past the spec sheet and you actually use it in your day-to-day life, you realise actually there's more to it than the specs. And that's where the MacBook Pro almost justifies its price tag. I'm not saying it's worth the price, but it definitely adds to that value you do get for the money you're paying. Now, Apple haven't yet fully released the M3 series of MacBooks. We haven't seen the M3 MacBook Air yet, and we haven't seen the M3 Mac Mini either. And because Apple haven't released an iPad with the M3 chip or a MacBook Air with the M3 chip as well, we can't compare it to those and see whether the fans are making much of a difference and the performance you get from the Pro model compared to the Air models. We haven't got the opportunity to test it out yet. So basically, I'm just going to be comparing the M3 MacBook Pro, the base model, to the M2 MacBook Pro 13 we had from last year, because that's really the comparison you're getting, really. Obviously, it's a lower price than the M3 Pro MacBook Pro, which starts at around £2,100. This is about £500 cheaper than that, but it's also around £400 more expensive than last year's base model 13-inch Pro, and therefore it's sort of sat in the middle of those two. So last year's MacBook Pro 13 that we had the outdated touch bar, quite an outdated chassis as well. It didn't have much of a port selection on the laptop either, it was just USB-C all over, and the display on it was very bog standard, to be honest. Not really a pro level display, that's for sure. However, this year we basically just got the MacBook Pro 14 at a cheaper price with a lower end specs. So with that, we do get the Pro XDR display, we get the large selection of ports that are available, we get much better battery life, we get a much better keyboard, and on the whole it's just a much improved design from last year's 13-inch MacBook Pro. And actually when you compare the price from this year's 14-inch base model to last year's 13-inch Pro model, you actually realise it's not that big of a difference. Because last year's 13-inch MacBook Pro came with 256GB of storage, it's not a lot at all. When you upgraded that up to 512, that's about an extra £200, so you were already looking at £1,400, closer to £1,500 just to get that extra storage from last year's 13-inch Pro. And then basically you're paying an extra £200 for this year's model for a significantly better display, so many more ports to utilise, a better battery life, a better cooling system inside the laptop as well, and a much better keyboard. But that price jump for me, absolutely worth it. Now, one thing that the base model M3 MacBook Pro absolutely trounced my M1 Max MacBook Pro, and that is the battery life. I was ridiculously impressed. Now, just for reference, my M1 Max MacBook Pro does not last very long anymore. I've had it for over a year and a half now, and the battery life capacity is at 91%. It's definitely gone down a little bit, and therefore the battery life as well has gone down. But to be honest, on a whole, I don't even use it out that much, so it's not big of a deal for me. Comparing it to this laptop is night and day difference. Because you're getting a less power hungry chip with the M3, it's much more efficient, doesn't draw as much power from the battery. I literally got bored trying to get this laptop to die. I just couldn't do it. Obviously it died after a while, but I was sat there rendering the same video, one after another, and it was still going for like 4 or 5 hours and it wasn't dying. And using this laptop for everyday tasks, the battery was lasting like literally all day and even to the second day as well. And one thing that surprised me as well, I was watching a film on Netflix, and I don't know if you've ever heard of the app called Vivid. It's a app on Mac that allows you to basically convert any SDR image into HDR content. So whenever you're using your MacBook, it's going to be hitting that 1600 nits of peak brightness. And I was using that full time and it didn't even damage the battery any much at all. I watched a film at full brightness, high volume, and it went from 100% to 92% by the end of the film. That just shows you how good the battery actually is. And this is definitely up there with the best battery life on any laptop. And in terms of design for this laptop, it's really good. It inherits the same design of previous 14-inch MacBook Pros, and that is not a bad thing whatsoever. In fact, it's a very good improvement from last year's MacBook Pro 13. Not only you've got a really nice keyboard, you've got a beautiful Pro XDR display, you've got a HDMI port now, you've got USB-C, you've got SD card reader, another 2 USB ports, headphone jack and MagSafe charging. From a design point of view, you can't even tell this apart from the more expensive MacBook Pros. And I quite like the fact that Apple have chosen to go down that route. I think it's really nice. I think for people who want to get that MacBook Pro look and feel, but want to save a bit more money because they don't need as much power, this is a great option. Now, in terms of pricing, and I want to more specifically talk about the upgrade path for this laptop, keep it simple. Do not upgrade this laptop when you go buy it. Get the base model at £1,600, because with that, you're getting the M3 chip, 8GB of RAM, 512 storage. The reason why I say strictly don't upgrade it, because as soon as you upgrade any part of it, you're knocking £200 up on the price. The only slight exception I probably would make is in case you really want that extra storage, because you can get a terabyte of storage for an extra 200 quid, which is okay, it's not bad. However, I wouldn't bother upgrading to 16 gigs of RAM, for example, because the issue with that is you're adding an extra couple of £100 onto the original price, which then makes it even closer to that higher end spec. And even if you're upgrading to the 16 gigs of RAM, you're now even closer to that level of the M3 Pro chip, which is about £2,100. But with the M3 Pro chip, you get a much better processor, a significantly better GPU as well, for only an extra £200. And it does show you really how good Apple's pricing ladder actually is. And they're really smart with it as well. But on a whole, I would say, if you're someone who wants to either use it for like just everyday office tasks, watching content, which is on this really nice screen by the way, if you're a photographer, you do graphic design, even if you're doing some light video editing tasks, this laptop's going to be perfect. It really comes down to how well optimized this thing is, and it is ridiculously well optimized. And it really shows, because the actual performance you get out of 8GB of RAM on a MacBook compared to 8GB of RAM on a Windows laptop, it's just night and day difference, and that's just all down to the optimization that you get with Apple products. It's like when you buy a PS5 or an Xbox. On paper, they're nowhere near as powerful as a PC. However, if you want to get a PC that gives you equal performance to a PS5, you're going to be paying significantly more than a PS5. And that just comes down to the optimization. And that's just what you're getting with a MacBook. It's going to be fast. It's going to be fast for a long time. It's going to get really good battery life. And everything just works well on a Mac. Except gaming. Hopefully in a couple of years we can come back to a good laptop that is good for gaming. But I think this laptop has a really good place in the market, because a lot of people want a beautiful screen. They want really good speakers. They want a bunch of ports to use, a nice keyboard, good battery life. But they might not necessarily need that ultra high-end performance that you're going to get from a much more high-end MacBook. And I think there's more people than you think who need that and who want that. That's going to do it for today's video. If you enjoyed the content, let me know down below. Let me know if you like this MacBook, what you think about it, if you think it's overpriced, if you think it's actually quite good. But if you enjoyed today's video, leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel. And on that note, I will see you next time. Goodbye.